Well, 5 years after the financial crisis hit, the government is slapping new fines on big banks like J.P. Morgan. Now, regulators say it's because these banks helped cause the crisis by pushing loans on people who couldn't afford them. But, Steve, you say if you're going to prosecute anybody for this, start with the lawmakers who are actually pushing banks to approve these subprime loans.
That's right. Since the 1990s, even going back to the late 1970s, the government has been pushing these as subprime loans, coming up with quotas and the like. And then, David, while we're at it, let's go after the Federal Reserve. Cheap money led to the housing boom and then bust, and the Treasury Department, which did the same thing. So it's regulators and lawmakers. In this case, the bankers are the least villains, but they're getting the biggest hit.
Bill, you have so many examples of lawmakers, mostly Democrats, some Republicans, by the way, saying, we're not going to have any trouble with this housing market. For example, here's Barney Frank in 2003.
The more people, in my judgment, exaggerate a threat of safety and soundness, the more people conjure up the possibility of serious financial losses to the Treasury, which I do not see. I think we see entities that are fundamentally sound financially and withstand some of the disaster scenarios.
Now, Bill, we know that's not true. Fannie and Freddie collapsed. The housing market collapsed because these politicians wanted people to take bad loans, wanted banks to take the bad loans.
Okay, I'll concede a few points. Fannie and Freddie are wicked. A lot of those Democrats are wicked. No, honestly, I'm being serious here.
Yeah.
The government messed things up by intervening in the housing market.
So why shouldn't we prosecute them?
Okay, but here's the problem. Here's the little problem. If you prosecute lawmakers for passing bad laws, you'd empty out every legislature. Now what are you going to do to run the government? That's just not the way you do it. If you don't like Barney Frank, don't vote for him.
But, Emac, the fact is, right now, they're trying to put all the problems of the financial crisis on the shoulders of the banks. Now, banks had some blame, but so did the lawmakers that were pushing these bad loans.
Yeah, I think you should pay the lawmakers in mortgage-backed securities. But here's the problem. You know, Bill Clinton, Barney Frank, even Republicans who are acting like the big boozy bartenders at the big boozy frat party, handing out the free drinks and the fake IDs. Even the National Bureau of Economic Research said they were trying to fix income inequality. And also, no less than a progressive newspaper like the Village Voice also said they were trying to lay claim to record number of home owners on their watch to act like a launch pad for political office. They were like the Grand Prix, start flag guy, the Monaco's Grand Prix, for all the banks to come piling in, following what the government was doing. I'm blaming the banks, too, but it started with the federal policies that caused the crisis.
Okay, Rich, Emac makes a great point. When the Village Voice comes out with a piece about Andrew Cuomo, who's now the governor of New York, by the way. He was head of HUD. There he is holding these two babies, Fannie and Freddie, and they blame him for the mortgage crisis. When the Village Voice is doing it, I think there's somebody other than the banks that bear the responsibility for this, right?
Well, sure, and then you have to blame Ben Bernanke at the Fed, because anytime you have excess liquidity in the system, it's going to find a bubble somewhere, and this one found a bubble in the housing market. Look, there are so many people to blame. I just hate the blame game. I do like big boozy parties, Emac, but, if I'm hungover the next morning, the fault is mine. Let's everybody take responsibility.
Hangover. It is a huge $6 trillion hangover. They turned the government to sweetheart subprime lenders. You know what? No income, no job, no problem. Here's a mortgage.
Okay,
that's what happened.
Morgan, you have looked into all of this. You've been focusing on housing for several years now. Who do you blame?
It's true. The blame game can go around with everybody from consumers and mortgage brokers all the way to the ratings agencies. It did, as Emac mentioned, it did start with politicians. I'll give you a great example. Well, so we saw it start with President Clinton, and then it rolled over into President Bush. I'll give you a great example. There was a statement on HUD's website. They took it down in 2007, I believe, and they say that not enough Americans have cash for down payments, and even more don't have sufficient, quote-unquote,
so who
income.
Needs cash, right?
A sufficient income for a house at current mortgage rates. And here's what the HUD statement said in response to that. Financing strategies fueled by creativity and resources of private and public sectors should address both of these financial barriers to homeownership. Wow. That's where it starts, and it just they kicked the rock down the hill, and it turned into a snowball.
Well, Mike Ozanian, what's worse than as bad as all this is, what's worse, it may be happening again, right?
David, and the problem is, what bothers me the most about what Obama is doing is, they're going after J.P. Morgan for things that Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual did, which is those are banks that J.P. Morgan bought at the behest of the government to save them. They're going after J.P. Morgan for things that those banks did before J.P. Morgan bought them. So what's, to your point, what are these big banks going to do next time the government says, hey, you know, we need your help. Can you come in and buy these guys?
Right.
They say, wow, wait a minute, I don't know. The last time this happened, if there was some bad things going on at those banks, you came back and punished us.
And I think that's the point. With all the blame that could go around, they're going for the blame that can actually pay out, because J.P. Morgan has money on its books to make right.
Steve, I don't want to get too into weeds here, but also J.P. Morgan has a chairman or a CEO, Jamie Dimon, who doesn't like a lot of what the Obama administration is doing. You think this is targeted to somebody for political reasons?
Oh, David, it's absolutely true. And there's another bank out there, BB&T, that is getting punished because they tried to defy the government having to take the TARP money. They didn't want to do it, and they're now being punished for it. So Jamie Dimon is being punished. He made it clear he did not like TARP money. He made it clear he was opposed to the president, and now he's paying the price for it. J.P. Morgan was actually the best-run bank out there, one of the best-run banks out there, with a couple of others like Wells Fargo. And J.P. Morgan's getting the big punishment. And by the way, when the Federal Reserve, picking up the point out there, made money cheap, housing prices went up, and everyone thought that was the natural law of the universe. Prices would keep going up. So even if a borrower defaulted, it didn't matter. The asset was going to be better than money good.
Last word from Steve Forst. Well,